Thank you, Mr. Gorty. In your testimony, we're going to switch up a little bit here. You state that U.S. mines produced 1.8 metric tons of copper in '93, roughly 60% more than produced last year. In the same time period, you stated that world copper reserves have more than doubled, but the U.S. reserves have declined from 15% to 5%. What accounts for the drastic decrease over less than 20 years? Has the United States simply tapped a larger proportion of its ore deposits than the rest of the world? Or are we just failing to get these projects off the ground?
Right. Congressman Gosar, that's a very good question. The answer has to do with exploration budgets. How much time on task, how many dollars did the U.S. mining industry put into exploring and expanding U.S. copper reserves? There's a general decrease. Most of the exploration money is going into gold and silver, gold and diamonds rather, and less so into copper. There's an issue about exhausting the current resource and not replacing it. You had testimony several years ago about the fact that we would need upwards of a dozen new mines brought on to replace mines that are basically reaching end of life of mine. I think it ties back to some of the points that Mr. Quinn has made. If the permitting process in the United States is extraordinarily long, capital required is very, very high, and companies just learn to look elsewhere in the world to develop the resource.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I asked because I recently introduced legislation H.R. 1904, a bill that would open up the third largest undeveloped copper resource in the world. How critical to our national security is it to ensure deposits like the one located in central Arizona can be opened up for production? And considering the prevalence of copper in alternative technologies like hybrid cars, solar panels, wind turbines, isn't the meteoric rise on our dependence for foreign minerals such as copper over the past 20 years an alarming national security risk? If we're truly trying to reduce our dependence on foreign fuels, isn't it critical we use domestic resources to construct alternative energy infrastructure?
I'd agree. I think the signals are there. I mentioned the OSD study that indicates without any specificity that there's already been some sort of program disruption. And copper is one of the metals that was mentioned in that category. That's not a new study. That's from several years ago. So the signal is being sent. And your indication about the increasing utility of copper is true as well. Copper has been used in automobiles for a long, long time, but the hybrids use something like twice the amount of copper. So the cars that we want to trend to, encourage people to drive, are going to create a larger requirement rather than a smaller requirement.
I think you're right. I think the average turbine uses over 4 tons of copper just in that matrices of alternative energy, if I'm not mistaken, so thank you. Permitting in my district is concerned because I've got the actual numbers. I mean, when we start looking at this, the average number for a NEPA to be processed in my district, in District 1 in Arizona, is 5.9 years and growing. And it seems that we've got an increased numbers of lawsuits that have been curtailed. I'd like to start with you first and ask you, how has the lawsuits using the Equal Access to Justice funding affected your ability to actually mine and have access to these ores?
My understanding of the permitting process is limited to my involvement with the Rare Earths Company in Colorado, so I'll yield to others on the panel who maybe have a better idea. Generally speaking, time is money.
Mr. Quinn, can you answer that question for me, please?
In terms of how it's impacted, what I can say is this: you basically have a law there that pays people, has got the taxpayer reimburse people to stop the projects. I don't have any metrics on how much money has been spent in that regard. There's, as you're inferring, Congressman, that there's ample opportunity for opponents to mining projects to slice and dice them through the litigation process.
Isn't it true that it's basically an ecological terrorism type aspect when we know that one envelope with one postage stamp at the last day of a recourse could be starting the whole process all over again?
Well, I could certainly say this, that a low-level investment can stop a huge investment. A postage stamp and a signature on a protest can stop a $1 billion project.
Thank you. I've got more questions, but I'll take them on my line.